Just to ask, like, are you chatting about what's happening in Atlanta, or is that kind
I
of
can
under
talk about a
tight
little
wraps?
bit. Talk about a little bit, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
I just can't
Cool.
post the pictures I took. So
Uh, was it pretty amazing?
it was incredible. It was the most surreal, exciting, sort of dreamlike fever miasma that I've ever experienced.
Oh God.
Just to steal Jordan Harper's term, it was like seeing your eyes in somebody else's face. And then I got to sit and listen to them. They used a lot of my dialogue from the book.
Yeah, yeah.
So they were filming a scene. And when I got to the set, because it's in a small town outside of Atlanta, and they're basically taking over this town. When I got to the house where the scene was, I was like, I knew the scene they were filming because it was exactly the way I saw it in my head. And I was
Oh
like, oh, this
man.
is Tom's house. And the showrunner, the executive producer, Joe Cole's like, yeah, this is Tom. I said, is this where Titus confronts him about taking money from local drug dealers? He's like, oh my God, yeah, this is the whole scene. So the way they designed the house, he has this boat that he shouldn't be able to get on a deputy salary, and everything was there in
Yeah.
real life. And then to hear them exchange in the way that I had written it in the book. And it's so weird. I don't know how to say this. The way they acted it
Yeah.
was the way it was in my head. You
Oh,
know,
that's
Tom sort of
amazing.
defending himself. Titus like, no, I know you did it. I got the proof. Then Tom like getting angry, like I can't make money on a deputy salary, and da, da, da. And then Titus very coldly, you're fired, Tom, and walking away, and Tom yelling, you need me, Titus. You need. I mean, it was just so the way they acted it was the way I was seeing it in my head, the way I wanted to see it. So
Oh,
it took everything not to cry. It really
yeah.
did.
That's amazing. All right, let's do this.
Yeah.
It seems like we got some folks in. Well, let's officially do this. Here's my silly intro. 'Twas the night before Fearmongers, and all through the dark, not an author was writing, not even Nicholas Sparks. The books were all shelved in the store with care, in hopes that essay Cosby soon would be there. The readers were nestled all snug in their beds, while King of Ashes still danced in their heads. And I am your host, Clay McLeod Chapman, and oh my golly, it is the end of 2025. We are saying goodbye, and we're going out in a blaze of glory. I cannot. I honestly cannot tell you how excited I am. I mean, maybe you can tell, but essay motherfucking Cosby. We got the author of Razorblade Tears, All the Sinners Bleed, King of Ashes, My Darkest Prayer, Blacktop Wasteland. Like this is my Christmas. So I don't care where we go from here. Like it is like it's done. Like this is all I ever wanted. So SA, thank you very much for joining me and everybody else on Fearmongers, man. How are you
Clay,
doing?
thank you for having me, man. It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for the invitation, and thanks for the opportunity to talk about scary stuff at Christmas. The English have a long tradition, or I should say Europeans, but I grew up on English ghost stories. A Christmas Carol is not an anomaly.
Yeah.
One of my favorite writers, John Dickinson Carr, has a terrifying locked room slash supernatural story called Blind Man's Bluff about a
Hmm.
murder at an English manor during Christmas, and I just love the sort of juxtaposition of the happiest time of the year and people being terrified out of their gourd. So
Yeah. Well, it's funny because when I was thinking about what I wanted to do for this last episode of the year, a lot of folks have, there've been a great number of new anthologies that have come out that have kind of spoken to that kind of tradition of like bringing back the kind of the holiday horror, like the kind of Christmas ghost story, the kind of haunted tale that you tell by the fireplace. And I had the good fortune of hanging out with you a couple weeks ago down in Richmond, Virginia, and I was just I mean, like it was just there, and I was like, oh my God, I bet you SA's got some good ghost stories. Um, but before we get to that, I have to ask, and I've said this to you in the past, but I'm going to put it on public record. I I honestly think that you are secretly a horror writer. And I want you, I'm going to paint you in a corner here because I want you to kind of either accept it embrace it or push back because I think it's in you.
You know,
There's a horror writer in you, man.
that's so funny you say that, because when I first started writing, I wanted to be a horror writer. My first inspiration, like millions of people, was Stephen King. When I wanted to write, I thought I want to be the next Stephen King or the next Clive Barker. And I love horror. I love horror as much as I love crime fiction. I grew up, so I've said this in interviews before, but I grew up in a house full of readers. So my aunt lived next door to where I lived as a kid. And she introduced me to all my horror writers that I love, not just King, but like I said, I've mentioned Clive Barker, but also Richard Matheson and Algernon Blackwood and um, John Saul and James Herbert and a lot of these 70s writers, because she was a big reader back when the mass market
Yeah.
paperback was king. And so you see like these writers like Ramsey Campbell and then later on I encountered like Poppy Z. Bright and folks like that. And so I've always loved horror, even the old, go back, into the 30s and 40s. M.G. Lewis and the book The Monk, one of the first great Gothic horror stories, or of course, Bram Stoker's Dracula or Mary Shelley, but also J. Sheridan Le Fanu, who wrote Carmilla. And so I've been a horror fan for a long time, and all the different subgenres of horror. So when I first started writing, I'm gonna tell you how. Now I'm gonna age myself. I'm gonna tell you how old I am. My first story I ever submitted was I wrote a short story about a very arrogant young man in high school who one day loses the ability to see his own reflection. He gets cursed and he can't see himself, and it drives him insane. And I sent it to Midnight Graffiti. Midnight Graffiti was
Oh,
back when they
wow.
still published actual horror magazines that you could pick up in the drugstore or in your local local department store. And so I sent it to Midnight Graffiti. I don't remember the editor's name, but they rejected it. But he sent me back a handwritten note. I was 17, and he sent me back a handwritten note, and he gave me some of the best advice. He told me how to get better at show, not tell. And he gave me the thing that I think every writer needs is he told me I had talent.
Hmm.
I didn't know that before then. I hoped I did. I thought I did. I prayed I might. But he said, you're very talented. You need to work on this, this, and this, but you have a very unique voice. I hope that you continue writing. And I don't remember that editor's name. I'll have to look it up one day. And I hope he's still around, because I'd love to talk to him and say thank you, because that inspired me to continue writing. What ended up happening, the reason I'm not known as a horror novelist, is I wasn't selling those horror stories. Nobody wanted. I wrote for years, and eventually I found myself writing for a crime fiction magazine, one of the last magazines that was still published, like a mass market magazine called Thug Lit. And Todd Robinson was the editor in chief and publisher of that magazine. And he paid. He was one of the few magazines. This is like, we're talking early aughts, that actually paid you money. And it's something in that clicked for me. And then I went full steam ahead as a crime writer. But I think there's a horror writer in me. I think there was a friend of mine. He's not currently writing anymore. But Ed Kurtz used to say, horror fiction and crime fiction are kissing cousins. They're in the same church. They're just in different pews. And I definitely believe it. And I would say this. I would say that I would say All This in His Bleed is a horror novel masquerading as a crime novel. And
Yeah.
so I'll take that. I'll take that designation gladly. It's not something I'm ashamed of at all. One of my best friends in writing is Steve Graham Jones, and he says it all the time. He said, you're a crime writer that loves to throw in horror elements. So
Yeah. Tomorrow you're going to get 5 calls from, however many different agents, like just, or editors being like, I'll take your horror novel. You got a horror novel? Tell me you still have a copy of that first short story though. Is it laying around in some file somewhere?
yeah, you know what? And this again, telling my age. This was back. I learned to type in high school on a typewriter, and then I was I'm of that generation. I'm Generation X, where they transitioned in mid semester from typewriters to computers. So
Yeah.
we were still learning how to type, but we were using computers. And so I printed it up on an old brother's word processor, and printed up off of that back when they still had the disc, and you had to slide it in and all of that. And so I printed it up. I have that story. I have all my horror stories. I will say, I have had the opportunity to take some of those old horror stories that people didn't want, and I've been able to re-edit them. One of my favorite stories I wrote in the last couple of years was a story called What Blood Hath Wrought. and I wrote that for. I was able to submit that with the other voices horror anthology of
Yeah, yeah.
marginalized writers, and that got a lot of good response. I wrote for the Orphans of Bliss anthology about addiction. I wrote a story called One Last Blast about some illegal drugs that are so potent they turn people to zombies and they come back from the dead to acquire more of that product. I have written a couple other horror stories that haven't come out yet for other various entities. Oh, and one of the highest honors of my writing career was I was invited to write for The End of the World as We Know It, the Stephen King anthology. And I
Yeah.
submitted my story, The Legion of Swine, about it's a horror story. Just beware of a man with pigs. I'll just say
you,
that.
you bring up King, and I was going to ask because it's not every day that life comes full circle like that. So to read him as a youth and then to kind of play in that sandbox. I'll ask one writing question and then I'll move on, I swear. But like what when you were given the kind of invitation to kind of like play in that world, was it how was it? Like what were
Oh,
those those kind of feelings going in?
it was so intimidating because, I don't, and we've had this conversation before. I don't think Stephen King gets the credit for being the literary genius that he is. Not
Yeah.
just a popular writer, not just a horror master, which there's no denigration to that. But he is one of the great American people of letters. And to be given the opportunity, I've had two really cool things, actually three really cool things happen with Stephen King. I have yet to meet the man. One, he reviewed All the Sinners Bleed. And if that doesn't make it a horror novel, what does?
Wow.
He reviewed it for New York Times and liked it. Second, I was invited to write for this anthology, and it was really fun and really cool. And it's like he mentioned me in the intro, so that's always great. And then last fall, I was invited to with other writers, a lot of other writers, to write a anecdote or blurb for the reissue of his On Writing book,
Oh
which
wow.
is just such a personal. Stephen King is about 25, maybe 30 years older than me. But reading On Writing, reading his early life, it was very similar to me. I grew up very poor. I didn't have running water when I was 15, but I read a lot. I was that kid that read a lot and, surrounded by people who read that loved me and trying to make sense out of the world through words. When you're living in abject poverty, to be honest, I saw a kinship there with him. So
Hmm.
to be able to be one of the voices in that book saying how much it meant to me, um, it is one of the things. I'm a big dude, but I'm a big softy, so it's one of the things that'll make you cry.
That's amazing. That is definitely the dream. But you mentioned kind of growing up, and I wanna kind of dive into it because for me, having read a lot of your work and kind of having seen you live, you have a command over the room. Like you have the kind of innate ability to kind of draw people in, and you spin a yarn like no other, whether it's on the page or in person. And it's because of that that I said to myself, there's got to be some ghost stories and essays life. Um, and I know that you grew up in Virginia. So I'm wondering if maybe you could kind of regale us with those kind of formative years as a child. Like, were are you a believer? Were you a believer back then? Like, was the kind of supernatural something that kind of wove in and
Yeah.
out of your day to day?
So I grew up in a very small town in Virginia called Matthews County, Virginia, and like a lot of small towns, there is this sort of under the surface supernatural sort of subterranean world that exists, right? Every town has the road that you're not supposed to go down. Every town has the unsolved murder that becomes a part of the larger sort of sort of zeitgeist. Every town, small town especially, you know, has their ghost stories. Whether it's tales of Revolutionary War soldiers that you could see if you go down to Haven Beach and see them marching uh, uh, through the fog, or if you go down to down to where I live in North, which was the area is called North, not the direction. There was an old abandoned plantation home. Um, like big grand manor, but falling down and falling apart. And so those stories, that sort of ghost world was always a part of my life growing up. Again, I said we were really poor growing up. My grandparents on my dad and my mom's side were fantastic storytellers, fantastic orators. My grandmother would would regale us with terrifying ghost stories of her childhood and things that she had experienced or things that she had heard. And then of course as a kid I became interested in it. I was the kid that watched, again I'm dating myself, I was the kid that watched In Search of and Unsolved
Ah,
Mysteries and
Leonard
so
Nimoy, his voice just like
yeah,
booming out. Yeah, I love
his
those.
his incredibly calm but yet terrifying voice.
Totally.
So I was that kid, and I used to go to the library, or yeah, this is even better. We used to have the Reading is Fundamental book fair, and they would come, and for $5 you could get like 3 or 4 books, and I would always get either the ghost story books or I guess now we would call them paranormal, but or cryptid books. But back then they would always have
Yeah.
books about Bigfoot and Loch Ness Monster and the Mothman and things of that nature. And so as a kid, those stories became my friends because I had friends, but I also could be very shy as a kid. I was always a big dude, and so a lot of times people always want to fight me for some reason. And so I would read a lot. And a lot of times on the playground, I'd read by myself, and I'd read old folkloric collections of short stories and tales. That the Virginia Ghost Story series, which is a series of books about Virginia ghosts. I used to love reading that. So growing up, that was always a part of my life, and I I am someone who went from being a 100% full believer to being 50% agnostic. I've
Yeah.
come around to the idea great claims require great evidence. That being said, I have an experience that I can't explain that happened to me. And I've told this story a couple times. I've actually done it in parts on social media. I'll tell this is a real experience that happened to me. And then I'll tell a ghost story that always terrified me as a kid that my grandma told me. So
All right.
when I was about 15, I had to change these people's names because they're all adults now. We're all living adult lives. So when I was about 15 or 16, my best friend, so I'm going to change his name. We're going to call him Norman. My best friend Norman, um, young surfer dude. We really didn't look like we'd be best friends. I'm a big old horse of a country boy, black dude that wrestled, and he was a big surfer dude that didn't like playing sports and everything. He was the first person I knew that had was he was how can I say this? He indulged in the natural herbs of the earth. And so he was the
There you
first
go.
person that I indulged in that with. And he used to have this big old Jeep Grand Cherokee with wooden panels. And so in our hometown of Matthews, there was an abandoned nursing home called the Horn Harbor Nursing Home. It's been knocked down now. It doesn't exist anymore. It's not there. But it was a nursing home. And I don't know the details of why it closed down, but it was closed. And it became, in a short order, the haunted place in Matthews County. And if you were trying to show how tough you were or trying to maybe find your way into manhood or masculinity, you would go down there. I walked around there. I didn't see nothing. I'm not afraid. So one night, I should say, my friend Norman picks me up. He said, "Hey, we're gonna pick up these two girls." Norman was way more advanced with girls at that age than I was. I was still very shy, still very kind of unsure of myself. That he was very aggressive, not aggressive. He was very confident. So
Surfer dude. Surfer dude. That's,
yeah, man, yeah. And so he picks up these two young ladies, and we're riding around in his car. We're listening to music. I remember this was when, again, dating myself. Nirvana's not on Nevermind, but they had their previous album, Bleach, had just dropped. And it was on a cassette. And again, I'm telling people how old I am. So we're listening to Bleach, and I'm like, wow, this is amazing. Didn't realize that grunge was going to take over my life because I love grunge music. But anywho, we're riding around, and Norman said, "Hey, y'all want to go to Horn Harbor?" And the girls were like saying yes, but giggling. And, it was just, it was very, and thinking about that, it was just a very prosaic, sort of innocent thing. We're just going to go around and walk through this haunted nursing home. And, of course, as a kid, as a young man, you're hoping maybe one of the girls gets scared and put her arm around you a little closer. And they were all smelling like, they all smelled like Vanilla Field. That was the popular perfume back then. I think both of them were in it. I can remember all these details like it was yesterday. So anyway, we get to
Amazing.
the nursing home, and the front door was two double wooden doors. So we go in. We had flashlights. We have two flashlights. I have one in Norman. And the one girl was with him. The girl with Norman, I'm gonna say her name was. I'm gonna say she was Jessie. We'll call her Jessie. And the girl was kind of talking to me. Let's say she was called Emily. So we're walking around. We got the flashlights, and then Norman starts doing what Zach Baggins is famous for. He starts yelling, I ain't scared of ghosts. There ain't no ghosts. Show me something. Show yourselves. And I'm like, I came from a very sort of wives' tale folkloric rural Appalachian background. And I was like, please, don't do that. Please stop. And in this nursing home, there was all this like detritus. There was like abandoned wheelchairs and stretchers and hospital beds. And we ended up getting to a hallway. On the east side of the hallway, there were 8 doors. So 16 rooms on the hallway. And there was a desk, like a central desk, like where nurses would stand when the nursing home was open. And I'll never forget, it was a picture of sort of a classic nurse in a black and white picture looking off into the distance wearing the classic nurse hat. Sort of like a Beaver Cleaver mom, but with the nurse hat on. So it's an old picture. So Norman keeps yelling, and the girl Emily that was with me, she's like, I wish he stopped. I was like, yeah. And I was like, hey, Norman, man, stop, man. He said, what? Show me if you hear ghosts, do something. I'm right here. And we're all kind of laughing, but I'm just getting more nervous and more nervous. And I swear, Clay, this happened. He said it one more time, and it sounded like something broke, like a glass or something shattered. It sounded like. And I'm looking around with the flag. I don't see anything. You nervous think about it. The doors on each side of the hallway were closed. Norman was about 15 feet away from us. He was in the head of the pack. Jessica was behind him. Emily was standing to me. She wasn't holding on, but he was standing next to me. And he said it one more time. Come on, show yourself. And then he used a profane word. And I was like, please, man. I was like, stop, man. Come on, let's get out of here. I said that. All the doors opened at the same time.
Oh my God.
Every door opened at the same time. And I mean open hard, not, I mean slammed open.
No.
And in the very last room on the right side at the end of the hall, an old wheelchair comes rolling out of one of the rooms.
No.
And the next thing I remember was Norman blowing past me, running back out the nursing home. Jessica's behind him. Emily is screaming. And I literally pull her along. We run out. We jump in his Jeep. We tear off down the road. We get out into the main highway. We're coming back into the courthouse, Matthews Courthouse area. And Norman was like, what the F was that? And I was like, I don't effing know. I told you don't mess with those spirits. And the girls were crying. It was just, and of course that was the end of the evening. We dropped the young ladies off, and then I went home. So that was that's my only one and only maybe supernatural thing. In the years since, I thought maybe that those windows were broken and there was some strong gale of wind that came in and opened the doors or something of that nature. But I have never been that physically frightened in my life.
Oh my God.
One last thing. As we're running out, as we're all running, I look, and I don't know to this day whether I actually saw this or whether my mind, because I was so scared, but the nurse picture that I was telling you about, it looked like there was like black oil running down her face. Oh, no. And I get to the car, we get to the Jeep, and if anybody is listening that think I just made this up, or this is one of my stories, if you ever see me in person or you ever run into me, I'll tell you who Norman really is, and he can confirm that we're still friends to this day. That he can confirm that story is true.
Oh my God. So wait, is the building still there?
No, it's been knocked down now. It got knocked down about 10 years ago. And the Horn Harbor, it was all, for anybody that's listening, so Matthews County is a peninsula. And if you go all the way to the end of the peninsula, it's what we call the New Point area. The local parlance, we call it down bottom. This was a nursing home that was at the bottom of New Point. It's all the way down. And it was actually, I bet back in the day, it was pretty because it overlooked the bay. But it's been demolished now. And so, but yeah, that's my one supernatural maybe experience.
That's enough. That would make a believer out of me. For the rest, you're talking about wanting proof, like doors and wheelchairs. I would be singing, I would be in the choir, my man. That's like intense. But I know the building's not there, but have you gone back? Like, have you like
Yeah,
walked the grounds and been like, yo,
I've
I can
gone back.
still
It's
feel it?
been made in. It's been made in. I think someone built a house there. It's like an
Mm,
Airbnb place. But I've driven down there and driven past it, and sort
do
of,
not stay in that
it's funny. As
Airbnb. Do
I'm
not
I'm
stay in that.
52. Yeah, I'm 52, and then I thought, has my memory made it more than what it was? Have I sort of misremembered things? And I talked to Norman, not actually, in July. He came. He doesn't live in Virginia anymore. He lives in North Carolina. He came to visit for 4th of July. We went out and had a couple beers and stuff. And I said, "Do you remember that time we went to Horn Harbor?" He said, "Man," he said, "every time I think about it," he said, "the hair stands on the back of my neck." And he's like,
Oh
and
my
I
God.
said, "So I'm not misremembering things." And then he said some things that I don't remember that he noticed. He said, when we were running out, when I ran past you, he said the picture of the nurse, how she was looking off into the distance. So when I ran past, I swear she was looking straight at me. He says, but
No.
I don't know if that's something I misremember. He's also, I'm pretty high, so I don't know.
Oh my God, the best Christmas gift for you. If I if I could just do this, I would like somehow give you that painting. Like
Oh
somebody
God,
out there
please don't.
needs to do like a rendition of the nurse and just
Please
send
don't.
it to SA. Like it's gonna be at some event, like someone's gonna like slip it inside a book and you're gonna open it up and there she will be, the nurse of the point.
Yeah,
That's
that's my
amazing.
true sort of supernatural experience. So
I I don't know why you're saying you're half agnostic. I'd be like, the glass is half full as far as I'm concerned. Um,
but
but
yeah, and so that was one of those things that happened was like, and then after that, I did the thing I think people do. I was like, well, I'm gonna become a ghost hunter. I don't think ghost hunter, but I was like, I'm gonna go around to other parts of the county and sort of trying to face my fear. And so
mhm,
I know people that are listening, if you know about Matthews County, there's Haven Beach has got all kinds of ghost stories attached to it. There's a Lady of the Storm. Supposedly, before any bad storm comes, you see a woman walking along the beach all in white. And
mhm,
we talk about bad hurricanes, bad nor'easters. There's the Revolutionary War soldiers supposedly you can see marching down at Haven in October and in the autumn night. So Matthews has their well known or somewhat well known ghost stories.
yeah.
Um, the other story that always has stayed with me since I was a little kid, my grandmother told me a story, and there's no name or title to it. This is a ghost story that she came up with, but I like to call it the 3 milk bottles. So when I was a little boy, she would tell me this story when she was a little girl. Then there was a young girl, a very beautiful girl, who got sick over the course of her summer, and she got her legs and arms were swelling, and she was like hiding away from people, and eventually she died, and they buried her, as they did back then in a pine box in dirt, no vault or anything like that, no cement top. And then about a week later, the general store owner Sibley, his father, because my grandma was saying this was in the 30s, so somewhere in the 30s, that he saw her after she'd been buried, and she was in the general store, and she stole a bottle of milk, and he chased her out the door. But when he went outside, she was gone. Broad daylight,
Mhm.
didn't see her. Look one way, look another way, didn't see her. And this happened 3 times. And but third time, people were starting to freak out. My grandma said, and this was in the and this was in the African American community. It's an African American girl, and Sibley's was a white gentleman. And so of course, it at first it felt like, oh, is this going to be a racial incident? It's going to be something like that. But eventually, even the white community was like, that girl's dead, and we've seen her 3 times. So the members of the community decided, well, we're gonna do what we do in the old days. We're gonna dig her up, make sure she's dead, and and so they go to dig her up, and when they dig her up and they open the casket, you see this beautiful young lady laying there, angelic face, hasn't looked like she's deteriorated at all. 3 empty bottles of milk are on her right side, and on her left side is a newborn baby crying, cradled in her arm. So she had been pregnant and nobody knew who the father was, and she had tried to kill herself, my grandma said. But in killing herself, the baby was still alive. And so
God.
the story, as I understand it, is her spirit was trying to keep her baby alive by giving it milk, since her body didn't have it. And
Oh
apparently
my
that young
God.
child was raised by his grandparents. That's the story my grandmother used to tell me that she swore actually happened. Again,
Yeah.
1930s. I wasn't there. I don't know, but that has always freaked me out. And so that's one that my grandmother told me personally.
Yeah.
Um, that has always freaked me out because it's supposed to happen in our neighborhood where my church that I went to as a kid is. If anybody knows Matthews, when you come to Matthews, my church is always the first church you see because it's the church in the middle of the road, Mayors Baptist Church. And so it's supposed to have happened there. And supposedly the woman's grave is still there. My grandmother gave me a name. I've looked for it. I didn't see it. But so that's, again, that's the legendary story. And my mother used to tell me that story that my grandma used to tell her when she was little. So, and I've told that story to my niece. I don't have children, but my niece, I was in her youth when she was young. I would tell her ghost stories, and that's one of the ones I would tell her all the time. Which I saw her recently. We were talking about it. She still freaks me out on her show. I'm like, me too. I'm with you.
Oh my God. Paying it forward.
Yeah,
That's amazing. I mean, do you find yourself like the kind of like the art, like the actual kind of like tradition of like telling a story, like telling a good ghost story, like getting it from your grandmother, your mother, like it's something that you pass down. Um, like do you find yourself kind of regaling others with stories that you know like it's just like this is what we do. Like you're at
yeah.
the bar, you're
Oh
out for a
yeah.
night. Like you have to
When
you have to spin the yarn.
when I was younger, before I got published, my mom, she had sort of an amateur. She babysat for people a lot. So there were always kids around the house, right? It wasn't like a daycare, but like on Monday she babysat for a young lady that worked late at the flag factory in Matthews, and then on Wednesdays, she babysat my niece because my brother and her mother both worked late on Wednesdays. So there were always kids around. So I love telling stories, and then my family, my cousin had some kids that were around the same age as my niece. So they're my cousins, once removed. So there was always a lot of kids, and I love telling kids ghost stories. And I grew up, again, dating myself, where teachers would tell you ghost stories in class for Halloween. And, they would always use like, I don't know how many people from me. One of my favorite traditional ghost stories is, the Golden Arm. And
Yeah.
it's a
Yeah.
jump scare ghost story, basically, about a woman who had a golden arm. But and it's funny when you tell ghost stories like that, you don't sit back and try to analyze them as you are as a writer. Like, why does woman have a golden arm? Why does she have like a wooden arm? Where did she get the gold? If she got a golden arm, why is she living in this old house? But you don't think about that. You don't worry about that. It's all about the story. And of course, anybody who hasn't heard the story, the woman dies, and before she dies, she makes her husband promise to bury her with her golden arm. Husband does bury her with the golden arm, but then he gets to thinking that's a lot of money in the ground, and so he goes and digs her up and takes her golden arm and brings it back to his house. And that night, she comes looking for it, and he hears the wind, and on the wind, he can hear her screaming, oh, wailing, "Where's my golden arm?" And then he hears her coming up the steps into the porch, up into the living room. He's hiding in his bedroom under the covers. He hears her coming up the steps, and he can still hear the wind blowing. "Where's my golden arm?" And then finally, he can hear breathing outside the blanket. He's waiting. He's waiting. She doesn't say anything. He thinks she's gone. And right before he uncovers the blanket, somebody grabs it. And she's like, "You've got it." And when I was a kid, I would tell that story to other kids. They would lose their shit because I would do all the voices and the theatrics. And, it's funny. We're having this conversation in wintertime in December. There is something about the winter, about the cold, about, it getting dark early in the fall and autumn that just lends itself to really interesting, spooky ghost stories.
Yeah. Oh man, I say if the publishing thing doesn't work out for you, I think you have this great side hustle, just telling ghost stories to kids
Now,
or to adults. Like I want to be in the circle where you've got the flashlight kind of underneath and just like telling us the golden arm.
Now, have you heard the one? I know you're in the area a lot. Sometimes there's a ghost story. It's not one that I was told traditionally as a kid, but it grew up in Gloucester. So in Gloucester County, Virginia, when you come into the county um, from 17, from Newport News or whatever, on one side of the road you'll see Ware Academy, this private school that's been there since I was a kid. And the other side of it, across from Ware Academy, if you look down, there's a long dirt lane or long gravel lane There's a beautiful manor home at the end. There's a ghost story attached to that place. So when I was a kid, the story I was told was back in like 1880s, 1890s, there was a young woman there who lived there with her family, and she would have what we would call now fainting spells, and or narcolepsy. And she would pass out. And one time she passed out and they couldn't wake her up. And they assumed that she was dead. And so they buried her in a beautiful dress. And they put these beautiful rings on her fingers. And then back in those days, they didn't wait. It was like, you down Monday, you're going to be buried by the evening. And so they go to bury her. It's the middle of winter. It's hard to get the ground open, but they finally get it open. They put it in the ground. It's so hard to get the ground open. They cover her, but the ground is in chips and chunks. It's not like the weight of dirt that's covering her. It's more like frozen chunks of soil. So anyway, late on that night, the family members, they hear a wailing and scratching at the door. Let me in. Let me in. And they don't go to the door. They're terrified. Next morning, they wake up and they open the door and they find the young lady laying on the porch, frozen to death. One of her ring fingers has been cut off. And they found out later that some grave snatchers, realizing that this young lady had been buried with quite a rich amount of jewelry, dug her up, moved all the stuff off of her, opened the casket. When they cut her finger off, it brought her out of her narcoleptic catatonic state. They run off screaming into the night. She wakes up screaming and dressed in this very thin burial shroud, goes up to the door and stayed there and waiting for them to open up the door all night. And nobody did. So,
oh God. See, that's the thing with Virginia. You can't walk two steps without someone being able to be like, someone's buried there. There's a ghost right there. That place is haunted. That tree is haunted. That field is haunted. You're always walking on ghost stories.
Oh, I gotta tell you this, man. I'll tell you mine. This is not a true supernatural experience, but this is sort of the story that's tied to an actual experience of mine. So I used to be, before I was a writer, I did a lot of different jobs. One of the jobs, I used to work for a landscaping, groundskeeping company. Somebody you hire to come cut your grass and do all this stuff. So in Matthews, right around my neighborhood, if you go down Chapel Neck Road, at the bottom of Chapel Neck Road, there's an estate called Auburn, 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 and it has a very weird history. It's some people used to consider it a cursed property because back in 1861, the daughter of the family who established Auburn was getting married, and she was practicing wearing her train and her dress, and she was at the top of the stairs when you go in the big manor house here because it's an old plantation, and she tripped and fell. And this is documented. This actually did happen. She tripped and fell and broke her neck. And the shoes that she was wearing that day, are on display in the house. Well, they were when it was a historical house. Someone's bought it now. It's a private residence now. But growing up, that was a story we all knew. We all knew the story of the Auburn ghost. And people said if you were in the house by yourself, you could hear her screaming as she falls down the stairs. The shoes were there, and they're so tiny. They're ridiculously small. Actually, I think who owns it now is Bruce Hornsby's brother owns it. But it has a cursed history because back in the 80s, it had been unoccupied for years. And this is a true story. John Lennon purchased it. He was going to use it as a getaway home, a summer home. And my uncle, who's passed on now, was a carpenter, but he also liked to drink a bit. And so he was hired by a property management company to make alterations, to make changes per Mr. Lennon and Ms. Ono. And he was telling people, but he didn't like the Beatles. So he didn't really know who John Lennon was. So he would tell us when we were kids, like when I was a kid, I should say, we would have a cookout or get together. He's, yeah, I'm doing some work down Auburn. I remember my father, who's passed away, asked him, like, who's doing work for down there? You know, that boy that wear the glasses, play the music. And my dad's like, who are you talking about? He said, I don't know. It was big one time. You know, he wear the glasses, he played the music, what is it, the ants or something. And my dad was like, it was my mom who caught on, because my uncle's name was Edward. Edward, are you talking about the Beatles? Yeah, them. And she's like, who are you doing work for the Beatles? And he's like, well, the glasses. I'm doing work. Nobody believed him. No one believed him. So then, unfortunately, sadly, you know, in 81, John Lennon's assassinated.
Yeah.
And in the obituary that they did in our local paper for him, they added that he had purchased the Auburn War, but he was never able to see it in person. He had never been there.
Oh my
and
God.
so My uncle was like, I told you, I told you.
Proof, proof.
So fast forward about 20, 23, this was 2008, 2007. I was working. So a little bit of my backstory: 2007, 2006. I was working. I had moved away from Virginia and come back after an unsuccessful relationship. And so I was working landscaping. So one of the things, this was when the Hornsby folks were buying the place. One of the things we got hired to do was go down and clean up, cut back the grass, trim back the hedges. There is a historical grave cemetery on that property of the slaves that were owned by the people who own Auburn, and also the members of the family that own Auburn. So it's a little historical grave cemetery there. So I'm out there by myself with a weed eater, and I'm cutting grass and stuff. And I know the story, and I haven't been published yet, but I'm an imaginative person. So I'm cutting the grass. I'm by myself, middle of the day, like 11 a.m. summer day, cutting the grass, cutting the grass, cutting the grass. Have headphones on, and cutting the trimmer. And then I stopped. The trimmer ran out of gas. I put the trimmer down, and I was like, I gotta walk all the way back to the truck to get the gas. So I just took my earphones off, standing for a minute, just catching my breath because this is a hump. This is a walk I gotta take. I took a deep breath. And I thought, and to this day I don't know, but I thought I heard somebody say hello. I turn around, looking at it. And the cemetery has a crumbling brick wall around it, like a square. And there are trees that have grown up through some of the graves. And I thought I heard it from over there. And I go look at them. And I did what every stupid person in a horror movie does. I say, hello? Nobody out here? Don't hear anything. Don't hear anything. Say, thinking to myself, I must be imagining. I go back to cutting the grass or getting myself together to walk to the truck, take another deep breath because it's hot. Man, I don't want to go to this truck. And I swear to God, I thought I heard somebody say in a very light, feminine voice, don't go. And I look around. Hey, that was it for me. I grabbed the weed eater, threw it on my shoulder, ran back to the truck, threw it in the truck, drove back up to the main house. And my boss was like, "You done that?" I said, "I'm done for the day. I'm done for the day." He was like, "What's wrong?" I said, I don't want to be out there. I want to go home. I'll see y'all tomorrow." He said, "You don't feel good?" I said, "Yeah, let's go with that."
Amazing.
So,
I say you're cut off. No more stories. You started this conversation saying that you didn't believe, and like you've done nothing but to you know do the contrary, like story after story. So I don't believe a word you say. You are a dyed in the wool believer. There are ghosts out there, and they are coming for you. Um, I can't thank you enough, man. This
oh
has
man,
been such a blast.
no man, I love talking to you, and it was such a great. I love any chance I get to indulge the uh the stunted horror writer in me. And so,
Okay, well then I have one last question for you, because I'd be remiss if I didn't ask. Like, when are you gonna come over to the dark side? When are you gonna, you know, you're right, they're kissing cousins, but like you can give us the tongue. Like we're ready for it.
yeah, I'll slip it in a little bit. Um, I actually have an idea for a horror movie.
Mm,
So once my schedule opens up a little bit, I want to take a break and maybe take a crack at writing a screenplay. So
wow.
we'll see. We'll
Ah,
see.
all right, you heard it here, folks. He's gonna do it. He's gonna do it. You just gotta ask for it. Um, SA, I cannot thank you enough. This has been so lovely. Like it's honestly just a privilege and a pleasure
Oh
to
man,
to chat with you, but just to hear you hear you tell some stories, especially
man,
the spooky
it's
ones.
my honor, man, and everybody listening. Let's have a safe, happy, spooky Christmas. Bring back the
Yeah,
traditional Christmas ghost story. I love
yeah. I better be
that.
careful. We'll do it again next year. Everybody listening, this has been Fearmongers. Really thank you for another lovely year of getting writers together to kind of talk about themselves and what makes a good spooky book. Really appreciate it. Really thankful. And yeah, have a wonderful, lovely holiday. Stay safe and happy New Year.
You too, brother. Y'all take
All
care.
right.
Bye bye.
Take care. Bye.